Breaking now, a six-figure peace offering just detonated across hip-hop like a financial nuke. Adin Ross is throwing $100,000 at black-owned businesses, and insiders are whispering one terrifying question. Is this generosity or a desperate bribe to stop his empire from collapsing? What the public sees, a streamer trying to make things right. What insiders claim is really happening, a creator who lost millions and is now in full scale damage control mode, using cash as a shield against the backlash that refuses to die. The Doechii fallout didn't just hurt feelings, it obliterated deals, froze partnerships, and turned Adin's brand radioactive. Behind that flashy number is a money trail that looks less like charity and more like a digital crime scene, and the culture is about to put him on trial for it. Because this isn't redemption, this is survival dressed up as an apology. Let me break this down from the beginning because the timeline is absolutely critical here. Sources tied to industry chatter say that after the May 2025 Doechii and Megan Thee Stallion comments, Adin admitted on air that two major brand deals evaporated, not delayed, not reworked, vanished, completely gone. These weren't small partnerships either. We're talking companies that have been backing him for months, suddenly cutting ties overnight. The message was clear: you're too toxic to touch. Then January 2026 hits, and the real nightmare allegedly begins. A massive NBA-related partnership was reportedly scrapped, with executives supposedly citing racist and misogynistic controversy as the final straw. Think about that. The NBA, one of the most culturally influential sports leagues in the world, they reportedly walked away from Adin Ross because his image had become too dangerous. That's not just a business decision, that's a cultural exile. And it gets even crazier, because right after that alleged NBA deal collapses, January 6, 2026, WAC 100 suddenly announces that Adin plans to donate a six-figure sum to black-owned businesses in Los Angeles. $100,000, just like that, out of nowhere. But the timing? Explosively suspicious. It drops right after Glass's Malone allegedly threatens him, right after the hip-hop world turns ice cold, right after his reputation is hanging by a thread. That's not coincidence, that's financial CPR. That's a man watching his empire crumble in real time and scrambling to stop the bleeding. Critics erupt online immediately. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of it. People are saying he's trying to buy forgiveness. They're calling it PR extortion money. One tweet that went viral said, "You can't Venmo your way out of misogynoir." Another said, "This is hush money disguised as charity." The reactions were ruthless, and honestly, the skepticism wasn't unfounded. Because when you look at the pattern, it's damning. May 2025, Met Gala drama, deals collapse. Late 2025, more jabs, more backlash, reputation tanks. January 2026, 6ix9ine drops the Bacon diss track. The culture explodes. Then suddenly, a $100,000 apology drops from the sky. Every scandal is followed by financial punishment. Every punishment is followed by a new attempt to clean his image. This isn't random. This is survival algorithm. This is someone who realized that silence wasn't enough, that apologies weren't enough, that the only language left to speak was money. And then TMZ runs WAC 100 as the so-called peacemaker, framing this like some kind of Hollywood truce. But insiders say this wasn't peace, this was panic. This was Adin realizing that without intervention, his career was about to flatline permanently. Let's keep it real. The optics are terrible. You spend months alienating an entire community. You make comments that get you labeled as racist and misogynistic. You lose sponsorships, you lose respect, you lose millions, and then you try to fix it with a check? That's not accountability, that's damage control. That's trying to put a price tag on forgiveness. And the culture saw right through it. Podcasts lit him up. Joe Budden allegedly went in on him multiple times. Jason Martin, formerly known as Problem, made it clear that the hip-hop community wasn't buying it. Glass's Malone's alleged threats showed that this wasn't just about internet beef anymore. This was real. This was personal. This was a reckoning. And Adin, he was scrambling. Because here's the thing. When you're at the top, when you're pulling in millions, when brands are throwing money at you, you think you're untouchable. You think you can say whatever you want. You think the internet will forget. But it doesn't, and it didn't. The Doechii comments became a flashpoint. They weren't just offensive, they were career-ending. They turned Adin from a rising star into a cultural pariah overnight. And once that train starts moving, it's almost impossible to stop. So what do? You throw money at the problem. You find a fixer. You get Rack 100 on the phone. You announce a donation. You hope the headlines shift. You hope that $100,000 is enough to buy you back into relevance. But here's the thing. The internet doesn't forget, and it definitely doesn't forgive that easily. Fans turned into full-blown investigators. They started digging into every detail. They pulled up old clips. They cross-referenced timelines. They analyzed every word Adin said in his so-called apology videos. And they weren't buying it because the energy felt transactional. It felt forced. It felt like someone reading a script written by a crisis PR team, not someone genuinely remorseful. And that's the problem. Authenticity matters, especially in cancel culture. If people sense that you're only apologizing because you got caught, because you lost money, because you're scared, then the apology means nothing. And that's exactly what people were saying about Adin. This wasn't heartfelt, this was strategic. This was a man trying to salvage what was left of his brand before it completely disintegrated. Now let's get into the motive, because this is where everything starts clicking into place. And honestly, it's darker than you think.
Adin Ross was on top of the world, streaming giant, millions of followers, brand deals stacked, celebrity collabs. He was untouchable, or so he thought. Because the moment he made those comments about Doechii and Megan Thee Stallion, everything changed. The culture turned on him. And when the culture turns on you in 2025, 2026, you don't just lose followers. You lose money, you lose access, you lose power. And that's exactly what happened. Reports started surfacing that Adin's income took a catastrophic hit. We're talking millions. Allegedly, some of his biggest sponsors pulled out within weeks. The NBA deal? That was supposed to be his golden ticket. That was supposed to solidify him as not just a streamer, but a legitimate media mogul. And it vanished. Allegedly scrapped because executives didn't want to associate with someone labeled as racist and misogynistic. Think about that for a second. You go from being on the verge of signing one of the biggest deals of your career to being blacklisted. That kind of fall off hits different. That's not just a setback, that's a financial apocalypse. And it gets worse for him, because while Adin's career is imploding, other streamers, other influencers, other entertainers are thriving. They're signing deals, they're getting endorsements, they're growing. And Adin? He's watching it all from the sidelines. That could spark some real envy fast. That can make you desperate. So what do you do when you're desperate? When your empire is crumbling? When the culture has turned its back on you? You find a way to buy your way back in. You find someone who can broker peace. You find Rack 100. Rack 100 is known in the industry as a fixer, someone who can mediate conflicts, someone who has connections, someone who can make things happen. And allegedly, Adin reached out to him. Allegedly, they had conversations about how to repair the damage. And allegedly, Rack suggested a public donation to black-owned businesses as a way to show good faith. But here's where it gets murky, because the donation wasn't announced by Adin directly. It was announced by Rack, and the framing was interesting. It wasn't positioned as Adin's idea. It was positioned as something Rack convinced him to do, almost like Rack was the mediator and Adin was the reluctant participant. And that raised eyebrows immediately. Because if you're genuinely trying to make amends, wouldn't you own it? Wouldn't you be the one announcing it? Wouldn't you be the one explaining why you're doing it? Instead, it felt like Adin was hiding behind Rack, using him as a buffer, using him as a shield. And the culture saw that. The culture called it out, because it didn't feel genuine. It felt calculated. It felt like a move orchestrated by a team of PR professionals, not a heartfelt gesture from someone who genuinely wanted to do better. Let's talk about the money itself. $100,000. To most people, that's life-changing. That's generational wealth. But to someone like Adin Ross, who was allegedly pulling in millions annually at his peak, that's pocket change. That's a rounding error. That's the kind of money you throw at a problem when you're trying to make it go away quickly. And that's what makes this so cynical. Because if Adin had donated $1 million, if he had donated $5 million, maybe people would have believed it. Maybe it would have felt like a genuine sacrifice. But $100,000? That felt performative. That felt like the bare minimum. That felt like he was asking, what's the cheapest amount I can pay to make this go away? And the answer, according to the internet, was it's not enough. Because the Doechii situation wasn't just about offensive comments, it was about a pattern. It was about misogyny. It was about racism. It was about a culture of disrespect that had been building for months. And you don't fix that with a check. You fix that with education. You fix that with real change. But Adin didn't do any of that. He threw money at it and hoped it would be enough. And the culture said no. Glasses Malone allegedly made threats. Joe Budden allegedly tore into him on podcasts. Jason Martin allegedly spoke out. The hip-hop community circled like cultural prosecutors, turning public opinion into a courtroom. And in that courtroom, Adin wasn't arguing innocence. He was negotiating the fine. But here's the tragic part. Behind all of this, there's probably a real human being who's scared, who's watching his career collapse, who's losing sleep over lost deals and public backlash, who's genuinely panicking. And in that panic, he made a move that might have been well-intentioned, a move that might have been an attempt to do something right. But the execution was so flawed, the timing was so suspicious, the optics were so terrible that it backfired. It didn't repair his reputation, it made it worse. Because now, instead of being seen as someone who made a mistake and is trying to learn, he's seen as someone who tried to buy forgiveness. And in 2026, in cancel culture, in the court of public opinion, that's unforgivable. So the motive becomes clear. Adin wasn't donating out of altruism. He was donating out of terror. Terror that his empire was collapsing. Terror that he'd never get another major deal. Terror that he'd be exiled from the culture forever. And that terror led him to make a desperate move. A move that might have saved him, or might have buried him for good. But here's the part that really hits different, the part that makes this whole situation feel even more tragic. Because while we're focused on Adin, on the money, on the drama, there are real people caught in the crossfire, and nobody's talking about them. Doechii, a rising artist, someone who was building her career, someone who was minding her business, and suddenly she's dragged into a public controversy because a streamer decided to make disrespectful comments about her body, her talent, her worth. Imagine that. Imagine working your entire life to build something, only to have someone with a massive platform reduce you to a punchline. That's not just offensive, that's dehumanizing. That's the kind of thing that leaves scars.
And it's not just Doechii, it's Megan Thee Stallion. It's every black woman who's been disrespected, objectified, and dismissed by men with platforms who think they can say whatever they want without consequences. This situation is bigger than Adin Ross. It's about a culture of misogynoir that's been allowed to thrive unchecked. And when Adin tried to fix it with money, it felt like a slap in the face. Because money doesn't erase trauma. Money doesn't undo damage. Money doesn't make someone feel whole again after they've been publicly humiliated. The emotional toll of this situation is immeasurable. For Doechii, for Megan, for every woman who saw those comments and felt the weight of disrespect settle on their shoulders. For every person in the black community who watched Adin get away with it for months before facing any real consequences. And now, allegedly, there are people in Adin's inner circle who are panicking. People who are allegedly losing sleep over lost deals, over public backlash, over the possibility that Adin's career might be over. And yeah, that's sad. But it's also a consequence of choices, a consequence of words, a consequence of a culture that allowed disrespect to fester until it exploded. Because here's the truth, Adin isn't the villain in some cartoon. He's a real person who made real mistakes, and those mistakes hurt real people. And now, he's dealing with real consequences. And maybe, just maybe, that's how it should be. But the emotional layer goes even deeper, because there are fans who looked up to Adin, young people who saw him as aspirational, who wanted to be like him, who thought he was cool, relatable, authentic. And now those same fans are watching him crumble, watching him scramble, watching him throw money at a problem instead of genuinely addressing it. And that's heartbreaking, because it's a lesson in accountability, a lesson in consequences, a lesson that you can't just say whatever you want and expect the world to forget, that your words matter, that your actions matter, that how you treat people matters. And maybe Adin is learning that lesson now. Maybe this whole situation is forcing him to reckon with who he is, who he wants to be, and what kind of legacy he wants to leave. Or maybe he's just trying to survive, trying to make it to the other side with whatever scraps of his career are left. Either way, the emotional damage is done, and no amount of money can undo it. Now this is where things get even crazier, because the evidence doesn't just stop at the donation announcement. There's a whole web of details that people have been piecing together like online detectives on a mission. Let's start with the timeline again, but this time, let's zoom in on the details that most people missed. May 2025, Adin makes the comments about Doechii and Megan Thee Stallion during a Met Gala discussion. The backlash is immediate. Social media explodes, hashtags trend, articles get written, and within days, allegedly, 2 major brand deals fall apart. Adin himself admits this on stream. He doesn't name the brands, but he confirms that partnerships were lost. Now, most people moved on from that. They assumed it was over, but it wasn't. Because behind the scenes, allegedly, things were getting worse. Industry insiders claim that other brands started distancing themselves quietly, not making public announcements, but quietly pulling back, quietly reconsidering, quietly deciding that association with Adin Ross was too risky. Fast forward to late 2025, more incidents, more controversies, more public feuds, and the reputation damage compounds. Every new headline pushes brands further away. Every new diss track, every new podcast rant, every new tweet storm, it's another nail in the coffin. Then, December 2025, reports start surfacing that a major NBA-related partnership is in jeopardy. This is huge, because the NBA isn't just a sports league, it's a cultural institution. It's a brand that's deeply connected to Black culture, to hip-hop, to the communities that Adin allegedly disrespected. And if the NBA walks away, that's not just a business decision, that's a cultural statement. And allegedly, they did. Allegedly, the deal was scrapped in early January 2026. Allegedly, executives cited the controversy as the reason. Now, we don't have official confirmation from the NBA, but multiple sources in the industry have corroborated this. And if it's true, it's devastating for Adin. Because that's not just lost money, that's lost legitimacy. That's the difference between being a streamer and being a mogul. And Adin just lost that chance. Now let's talk about January 6th, 2026, the day WAC 100 announces the donation. Let's break down exactly what happened. WAC goes live. He talks about how he's been mediating between Adin and the culture. He talks about how Adin wants to make things right. He talks about how Adin is planning to donate $100,000 to Black-owned businesses in Los Angeles, and he frames it as a peace offering, a gesture of good faith. But here's what people noticed immediately. Adin wasn't on the live. Adin didn't make the announcement himself. Adin didn't explain his reasoning. It was all WAC, and that felt off. Fans online started digging. They started comparing dates. They started looking at who WAC was connected to. They started analyzing the language he used, and they started asking questions. Why did WAC make the announcement and not Adin? Was Adin afraid to face the culture directly? Was he hiding behind WAC? Was this even Adin's idea, or was it WAC's? And then, people started looking at Glasses Malone. Glasses Malone, a respected figure in LA hip-hop, had allegedly made threats towards Adin, and those threats reportedly came just days before the donation announcement. So people started connecting dots. Did Glasses Malone threaten Adin? Did that scare Adin into action? Did Adin reach out to WAC in a panic? Did WAC broker a deal where Adin donates money in exchange for protection?
That's the theory that started circulating online, and honestly, the timeline supports it. Let's also talk about the language WAC used. He repeatedly emphasized that this was about peace, about healing, about moving forward. But critics pointed out that nowhere in his announcement did he address accountability. Nowhere did he talk about Adin genuinely understanding why his comments were harmful. Nowhere did he mention education, growth, or real change. It was all transactional. It was all about the money. And that's what made people so angry. Because here's the thing, if Adin had come forward himself, if he had said, "I messed up, I said things that were harmful, I've been doing the work to understand why, and as part of my commitment to doing better, I'm donating $100,000 to Black-owned businesses," maybe people would have responded differently. Maybe it would have felt genuine. But instead, it felt like he was trying to buy his way out, like he was treating the culture like a vending machine. Insert cash, receive forgiveness. And the culture said, "We're not for sale." Online detectives also started looking at Adin's behavior after the announcement. Did he follow through? Did he actually donate the money? Where did it go? Which businesses received it? Was it publicized? Was there transparency? And the answers were murky. Some reports say the money was distributed. Others say it's unclear.
There's no public record of which businesses received funds. There's no transparency about the process, and that raised even more suspicions. Because if you're doing something genuinely good, wouldn't you want to showcase it? Wouldn't you want to celebrate the businesses you're supporting? Wouldn't you want to be transparent about the impact? But there was silence, and silence breeds doubt. People also started comparing Adin's donation to other influencers who faced similar controversies. They pointed out examples of creators who donated significantly more, who did it quietly, without fanfare, who genuinely seemed committed to change, and Adin's $100,000 started to look even smaller in comparison. One viral thread broke down the math. It showed Adin's estimated peak earnings, it showed how much he allegedly lost from the brand deals, and it showed that $100,000 was less than 1% of his alleged peak net worth. Less than 1%. That's not a sacrifice, that's a tip. And the internet dragged him for it, because it confirmed what everyone suspected, that this wasn't about making amends, this was about making the problem go away as cheaply as possible. So when you look at all the evidence, the timeline, the language, the lack of transparency, the minimal amount, it paints a pretty damning picture. It paints a picture of someone who's terrified, scrambling, and willing to do whatever it takes to salvage what's left of his career, even if it means reducing accountability to a transaction. Now let's talk about the voices that have been surrounding this situation, because while Adin is at the center of the storm, there's a whole ecosystem of people who've been weighing in, adding fuel to the fire, and keeping this controversy alive. Budden, one of the most influential voices in hip-hop media. Allegedly, he's gone in on Adin multiple times on his podcast, breaking down the comments, breaking down the donation, breaking down the hypocrisy. And Joe doesn't pull punches. He's known for calling people out. And allegedly, he's made it very clear that he doesn't believe Adin's apology is genuine. Jason Martin, formerly known as Problem, also spoke out, and his words carried weight, because Jason Martin is respected in the West Coast hip-hop community. And when Jason Martin says that the culture isn't buying it, people listen. Allegedly, he made statements suggesting that Adin's donation felt performative, that it felt like he was trying to check a box instead of genuinely doing the work. Glasses Malone. The alleged threats he made toward Adin became a huge part of this story, because Glasses is connected, he's respected, and when someone like that allegedly steps in, it's not just internet beef anymore. It's real, it's street, it's serious. And that's allegedly what pushed Adin to action. That's allegedly what made him realize that this wasn't just about online comments. This was about real-world consequences. And then there's 6ix9ine, the Bacon diss track. That was brutal, that was personal, and that was public. And it added another layer to the pile-on, because now it wasn't just the culture criticizing Adin, it was other creators, other entertainers, other people in the industry publicly dragging him. And that compounds the damage, because every new voice that speaks out, every new diss track, every new podcast segment, every new tweet, it keeps the controversy alive. It keeps Adin's name in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and it makes it harder and harder for him to move on.
Meanwhile, fans online have been dissecting every single detail. They've been pulling up old clips of Adin making similar comments. They've been comparing his current apology to past apologies. They've been analyzing his body language in videos. They've been looking for any sign of sincerity or any sign of deception. And the consensus seems to be skepticism. The majority of people don't believe this is genuine. They believe this is damage control. They believe this is a man trying to save his career, not a man trying to grow as a person. There's also been discussion about Wack 100's role in all of this. Some people see him as a mediator, someone trying to help. Others see him as an opportunist, someone who saw a chance to insert himself into a high-profile situation. And that's raised questions too, because if Wack is the one pushing for the donation, does that make it less genuine? Does that make it feel more like a business transaction than a heartfelt gesture? And then there's the broader influencer community. Other streamers, other creators, they've been watching this unfold. Some have spoken out in support of Adin, most have stayed silent. And that silence is telling. Because in influencer culture, silence often means distance. It means people don't want to associate. It means they're protecting their own brands. And that's gotta hurt for Adin, because when you're at the top, everyone wants to be around you. Everyone wants to collab. Everyone wants to be seen with you. But when you're falling, people scatter. And that's exactly what allegedly happened here.
There's also been speculation about what comes next for Adin. Can he recover from this? Will brands ever work with him again? Will the culture ever forgive him? Or is this the beginning of the end? Some people think he can bounce back. They point to other creators who faced similar controversies and eventually recovered. They say that if he stays quiet, if he genuinely does the work, if he proves over time that he's changed, maybe he'll get a second chance. Others think he's done. They say that in 2026, in cancel culture, some lines can't be uncrossed. That once you're labeled as racist and misogynistic, especially by the black community, especially by women, there's no coming back. That the damage is permanent. And honestly, it's hard to say which side is right, because we've seen both. We've seen people get canceled and disappear forever, and we've seen people get canceled and come back stronger. It all depends on how they handle it. And so far, Adin's handling has been questionable at best. And this story has way bigger implications than just one streamer's career. What we're seeing here is a fundamental question about accountability in influencer culture. Can you donate your way out of controversy? Can money replace genuine change? And if it works for Adin, what precedent does that set? Because if this donation is successful, if Adin manages to rehabilitate his image and get back to where he was, then it sends a message to every other influencer out there. It says that you can mess up, you can hurt people, you can disrespect entire communities, and as long as you throw some cash at the problem, you'll be fine. And that's terrifying, because it reduces accountability to a transaction. It turns forgiveness into a commodity. It suggests that outrage has a price tag. And once you start thinking that way, the whole system breaks down. The bigger conversation here is about responsibility. When you have a platform, when you have millions of followers, when you have influence, you have a responsibility to use that power carefully, because your words matter, your actions matter, the example you set matters. And when influencers like Adin fail to take that responsibility seriously, when they make harmful comments and then try to fix it with money, it undermines the entire concept of accountability. There's also a conversation about who gets forgiven and who doesn't, because let's be real, if a smaller creator, someone without Adin's resources, someone without WAC 100 in their corner, someone without $100,000 to throw around, if they had made the same comments, would they get the same chance at redemption, or would they just be canceled and forgotten? The answer is probably no. And that speaks to a deeper inequality in influencer culture. The big creators, the ones with money, the ones with connections, they get second chances. They get PR teams, they get mediators, they get donations that buy them back into relevance. But the small creators, they don't get that. They just get canceled. And that's not fair. That's not accountability. That's privilege. So Adin's situation is forcing us to ask hard questions about power, about money, about who gets to be forgiven, about what real accountability looks like, and about whether influencer culture is fundamentally broken. Because if someone can disrespect an entire community, lose millions, throw $100,000 at the problem, and then potentially get away with it, then yeah, the system is broken.
And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment that forces a reckoning. A moment where the culture says, enough. We're not accepting performative apologies anymore. We're not accepting donations as substitutes for growth. We're demanding real change, or we're walking away. And if the culture does walk away, if brands keep distancing themselves, if fans keep calling him out, if the backlash never subsides, then Adin becomes a cautionary tale, a warning to every other influencer that there are lines you don't cross, and if you do, there might not be a way back. So here's the $100,000 question that's tearing the internet apart. Was this donation a heartfelt attempt to repair damage, or a calculated bribe to keep Adin's career from total annihilation? Let's look at the evidence one more time. The suspicious timing, the lack of transparency, the minimal amount relative to his wealth, the fact that it was announced by WAC, not Adin, the fact that it came right after alleged threats, the fact that it followed a pattern of scandals and financial losses. All of that points to one conclusion. This was panic. This was desperation. This was a man watching his empire crumble and throwing money at it in a last-ditch effort to stop the collapse. But here's the other side. Maybe Adin genuinely wanted to do something. Maybe he genuinely felt bad. Maybe he was advised that a donation was a good first step. Maybe the execution was flawed, but the intent was real. And honestly, we might never know, because intent is invisible. We can only judge actions, and the actions, they don't look good.
If millions were already lost from brand deals, if the NBA partnership was already gone, if the reputation damage was already done, then was $100,000 the cheapest lifeline he could throw himself? Was it a calculated bet that a small donation would be enough to shift the narrative without costing him too much? Or was it genuinely the best he could do in a moment of panic? Was it a genuine attempt to start making amends, even if the amount was small, even if the execution was messy? The speculation is endless, and that's part of what makes this story so compelling, because we're all trying to read between the lines, trying to figure out what's real and what's performance, trying to decide if Adin deserves a second chance or if he's already blown it. And the culture is split. Some people see a step toward healing. They see someone who messed up, who's trying to do better, who's taking action even if it's imperfect. They see potential for growth. Others see a desperate man throwing money into a burning reputation. They see someone who's more concerned with saving his career than genuinely understanding the harm he caused. They see manipulation. And both sides have valid points, because the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Adin probably does feel bad, he probably is scared, he probably does want to fix this, but he also probably doesn't fully understand the depth of the harm. He probably is more focused on saving his career than on genuine growth, and he probably thought that money would solve the problem faster than real accountability.
And that's the tragedy of this whole situation, because it could have been a moment of real redemption. It could have been a moment where Adin stepped up, owned his mistakes, did the hard work of education and growth, and came back as a better person. But instead, it became a spectacle, a controversy, a cautionary tale about what happens when you try to buy forgiveness instead of earning it. And now the culture is split. Some see a step toward healing, others see a desperate man throwing money into a burning reputation. So tell us, can you donate your way out of misogynoir? Or is this the moment Adin Ross's empire finally collapses for good? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Adin's donation was genuine or just damage control? Do you think he deserves a second chance, or is he done for? And do you think $100,000 is enough to make up for months of disrespect and harm? Because this story is far from over. More details are going to drop, more voices are going to weigh in, more twists are going to surface, and we're going to be here covering every single development. Stay locked in, because this is one of the most explosive controversies of 2026, and whether Adin recovers or completely crashes, it's going to be a lesson for the entire influencer industry. Make sure you like this video if you made it this far, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update, because we're covering every twist, every reaction, every new piece of evidence that comes out. Share this with someone who needs to know what's really going on, because this isn't just gossip, this is a cultural moment. This is a conversation about accountability, about power, about money, and about whether real change is even possible in influencer culture. I appreciate you for rocking with me through this deep dive. This was a long one, but it needed to be, because this story is complex, is layered, and it deserves more than just surface level coverage. So stay safe out there, stay critical, stay informed, and remember, the internet never forgets, and it definitely doesn't forgive easily. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.